Welcome back. A British court has recently convicted 2 Christian preachers of a religiously aggravated public order offence after they quoted from the Bible on the streets. Here's a quick video of what happened.
Hey, listen, you're causing a disturbance.
No,
now.
I'm preaching,
You
sir.
are not welcome, okay? What is your name?
Michael.
Michael what?
Michael. I don't have to give you my surname.
You do?
No.
Well, I'm going to give you a dispersal notice to leave the area.
I'm not going to leave the area, sir.
If you fail to do so, you will be arrested.
Okay. I'll be arrested.
Get up! Get up!
I've got a bad back, sir.
Well, get up! Get up!
You're hurting my arm.
Let's discuss the arrest now with political commentator Mohammed Ansar and Roger Kiska. He's from the Christian Legal Centre, whose organisation helped to represent those gentlemen who were accused of those offences. First to you, Roger, I'm presuming that your organisation believes that these convictions of the preachers in question was unjustified.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the courts have held for decades, both here and at the European Court of Human Rights, that freedom of speech includes the right to shock, offend and disturb. Precisely, that means there is no right not to be offended. Now, admittedly, the Bible has passages in it which are offensive to people who are of other religions or of no religion at all. And spoiler alert for those who haven't read it, but pretty early on in the New Testament, Jesus himself is killed for words that were offensive to a certain segment of the population. It was not, freedom of expression didn't exist then, thankfully it does now.
Mo, what's your take on this story?
I think it's...
sorry, let's just come across to Mohammed, please, yeah.
I think there are some very fair points made there. I think freedom of expression, freedom of belief and conscience and the right to express those beliefs is important. As a person of faith and reaching out across the aisle to Christians and other people, you know, preachers have the right to go and preach the gospel or from any scriptures. However, I think there is a line that needs to be determined in law. Even the European Convention on Human Rights in Article 10.1 talks about the right of freedom of expression and belief, but at the same time in Article 10.2 it puts certain limits on those freedoms around morality, around criminal acts, around national security, a whole host of things. So I don't think any of us want to see a society where our children are going to be abused on the streets, be sworn at because of their ethnicity, their religion, or the colour of their skin, or their sexual identity or orientation. And I think the public square needs to be kept clear of this kind of hate preaching. And that's really ultimately what the courts found this is. This was causing distress, alarm and concern. And the courts, it was a robust case. I think they were, both sides had the opportunity to put their cases forward, and Andy Williams, the Chief Inspector, also spoke out and said that, you know, there are certain limits that need to be had. Shoppers going about their business in town shouldn't be abused, harassed, harangued, or being made to cause distress or alarm. I think that's pretty sensible, isn't it?
I mean, that is pretty much what the court seemed to conclude. Roger, do you think that is still freedom of speech, making offensive comments? I think there were also comments, it was reported in there, that they were calling people who were homosexual or living in sin disgusting. So it wasn't even just religious. It was comments that were clearly offensive to a large number of people. Do you still defend that that's freedom of speech?
Again, I think it's pretty clear what the courts have said, that you have a right to shock, offend and disturb. And if we only had the freedom to share what everyone believed, that wouldn't be a freedom at all. And, you know, I think they had the right to say it. I think the people walking by had the right to continue to walk on by. They had the equal right to share their own opinions. That's what freedom of expression constitutes.
But where do you draw the line? There must be a point at which you particularly would draw the line. If you're going out onto the street and people are offending you, there's going to be a time when you don't want to go onto the street because it's just too painful for you. Where do you draw that line?
Look, I'm someone who, just like anyone else, can get offended. I'm offended, for example, by certain campaign groups and certain media outlets who portray Christians who believe in the sanctity of marriage as between one man and one woman, or the fact that children grow up better with a mum and dad as being small-minded or bigoted. Because these are the people who are running homeless shelters, doing prison ministry and all sorts of social outreach. Yet while I'm offended, I'm not calling it hate speech. Instead, I'm thanking God that I live in a country where I can go on television and speak my point of view, where I can engage parliamentarians and try to change their mind. That's what freedom of speech is all about.
OK, probably a lot of people at home watching haven't seen much of this video, so we're just going to show a clip now of the moment of the arrest.
Can I just confirm, are there any offences, or is this guy just preaching and he's just gone over the top and he's just wound up people as ASP?
So you come and grab me and you don't know that? I don't understand that.
So, Mo, we were just hearing the officer checking in, basically, to see if these gentlemen had carried out any kind of offence. So at that point, in his mind, he didn't know that they carried out any offence. Wasn't he a bit quick off the mark here to be going in and apprehending them?
I don't know. I hope, and it certainly seems to be used as common sense. And common sense policing is something we need to welcome. Whilst they were preaching, and don't forget, I understand the person who was taken to court and found guilty has been tried on 2 previous occasions for something very similar and was found not guilty, was found innocent, or there wasn't enough evidence. But what happened here is he was apparently preaching, and when it started getting too heated, when it crossed a line and people were getting angry, there were arguments, there was abuse, there was shouting, it was about to, as we say in England, it was about to kick off. Just before it kicked off, the policeman stepped in and said, look, that's enough, we need to stop. Now, that is actually what we want our police to do, say, look, have freedom of speech for a limit. I think my bigger concern is that this group, Christian Concern and the Christian Legal Centre, I mean, have a history of this kind of outrageous behaviour. If it was Muslim groups or Jewish groups or organisations, we'd be very quick to condemn them. But
freedom of
hate,
expression.
Intolerance, and
is that outrageous to support democracy, democratic principles?
Well, part of this freedom of expression, apparently, on 10th of February 2011, I wrote an article following a meeting where Christian Concern and Andrea Minicello from the Christian Legal Centre and Christian Concern met with the English Defence League over the telephone with UKIP and with Gerald Batten to have a meeting calling about dismantling multiculturalism. It was an out-and-out attack on multiculturalism. It was an out-and-out attack under the stewardship of Gerald Batten and Nigel Farage to attack Muslims and multiculturalism. You guys have a terrible track record of this
absolutely
kind of rubbish,
true.
and you need to stop.
That's not true, first of all.
I've seen the minutes. I've seen the minutes of the meeting.
Look, what's important here is to remember that freedom of expression means the right to shock, offend, and disturb. Now, who is going to be the arbiter of what is criminal speech because it's offensive and what is not criminal speech because it shock, offends, and disturbs?
We have the good and great in society come together already to make these determinations. Look, we had the good and great in society come together to make these determinations. The gateway that you want to allow to open up, to allow you guys and have hate preachers of all ilk on the street saying outrageously offensive and hurtful and harmful things to minority groups are being massively oppressive. It's the same.
That is an opinion that is protected by freedom of expression.
It's the same gateway that people will go through to harm and demonise minorities. God forbid, look what happened after Brexit. Imagine if you guys had your way and you opened another gateway to more hate speech and more intolerance and more prejudice. What is going to happen to our communities? Bristol has enough problems as it is without you guys out there stirring up hatred. This isn't the example of Christ.
Now, using words like hatred, you guys, I mean, that is setting up a straw man. That's not realistic. I mean, it is Christians in society who are providing a lot to charity.
I've given speeches. Listen, I've given speeches in mosques, I've given speeches in cathedrals, I've given speeches in churches and spoken in synagogues at length about why we need more tolerance. And Muslims should take the example of Prophet Muhammad. Christians should take the example of Prophet Jesus. Peace be upon them all. All of the prophets spoke about tolerance and having a plural, united societies with the scriptures. To turn around and say that there's the Muslim God is somehow a liar or evil, or Muslims are believing in, devil, cultish worship, or whatever the kind of phrases that are being bandied about.
Look, the cure to bad speech is more speech.
There's only one God. On theology,
it's engaging people like yourself. It's not shutting down the debate.
Roger, I just would like to ask you a question. How do you feel about the police and their attitude to different religions? Do you think that they're even-handed in the way they treat the differing religions?
No, I think working at Christian Legal Center, we get calls from street preachers all the time about being harassed by the police, being arrested but then not charged, so they have no legal redress after that. So this is a serious issue. We don't hear that from other elements of the community and other segments of the community. So I do think it is viewpoint discrimination.
And Mohammed, what's your
claim? Because we've seen over the
yeah, go ahead. Just want your reaction. You may think very differently.
Well, over the last few years, we've seen overwhelmingly, we've had all-party parliamentary groups in Parliament. We've seen report after report from think tank after think tank saying that the rise in hate crimes, the disproportionate policing of Muslim communities and Muslim organisations, trials without evidence, secret trials, the increasing incursion on civil liberties and freedoms is what Amnesty talked about in their recent report from the state apparatus, which is growing. So we see the rise of the far right, we see the state apparatus increasing in its attitude. We've seen Muslim organisations and charities having their banks shut. We've seen, in fact, Russia Today at one point being come after and having their bank accounts shut. So, you know, the intolerance in Britain and in Europe is palpable. It's increasing, and what we should be doing is saying, look, we need to come together, we need to tackle extremism together, we need to stand shoulder to shoulder. This idea that we allow for more hatred, absolute freedom of speech exists nowhere.
We're not allowing for more hatred.
Fallacy,
we are allowing for the law to work as it is meant to work. You have a fundamental right to freedom of expression.
Gentlemen, I'm afraid we're going to have to wrap things up at that stage. My apologies. We've had a reasonable discourse there. Many thanks for joining us on RT. My guest, political commentator Mo Ansar, and Roger Kiska there on the left of our screens from the Christian Legal Centre. Many thanks.